I was standing in the frozen food aisle of a grocery store, holding a pecan pie in one hand and a box of chocolate cookies in the other, when I called my mother. "What should I bring tonight?" I asked. "The pie or the cookies?" There was a pause. Not the normal kind of pause. The kind that makes you pull the phone away from your ear just to check if the call is still connected. Then Mom said quietly, "Oh, honey, we already had Christmas." I laughed. I honestly thought she was joking. "What do you mean, you already had Christmas?" Another silence. Then my father took the phone. "We decided it was easier this way," he said. I remember staring at the shelves in front of me, trying to understand what he meant. Easier. Without me. An hour later, I would walk out of that store with the cookies still in my cart and a decision that would change my relationship with my family forever. My name is Claire Bennett, and until that morning, I thought I knew exactly what my place was in my family. I was the organizer. The dependable daughter. The one who remembered birthdays, made reservations, bought the extra dessert, and showed up early whenever something needed to be done. If Mom forgot to order flowers, I handled it. If Dad forgot a gift, I usually had something in my car. If two relatives were arguing, I was the one who quietly made sure they sat at opposite ends of the table. I never thought of it as a burden. I thought it was what family did for one another. But that Christmas morning, I began to realize that my family had gotten used to something I had never consciously agreed to. They had gotten used to me being useful. 3 months earlier, I had bought my parents a small house in a quiet town outside Pittsburgh. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even particularly large. Just a comfortable 3-bedroom ranch with a little backyard, a wide front porch, and a grocery store 5 minutes away. My father had complained about the stairs in their old house for years. My mother loved the idea of having everything on one floor. So I bought the house. The price was $310,000. I had saved for years to do something meaningful for them. I lived below my means, invested carefully, and rarely spent money on things I didn't need. When I finally had enough, I thought, this is it. This is how I tell my parents thank you. The house was still legally mine. The paperwork had been prepared, but the transfer had never happened. My parents knew that. At least, technically. But emotionally, I had already given it to them. They had visited twice. Mom had already chosen curtains. Dad had picked the corner where he wanted to put his old leather chair. They had even joked about hosting Christmas there the following year. I smiled every time they talked about it. I didn't realize they had stopped saying your house. They had started saying our house. And I didn't notice. Not until Christmas morning. After my father told me they had celebrated without me, I stood in the grocery store aisle for several seconds without speaking. Then I asked, who was there? He listed the names. Mom. Dad. My sister Hannah. Aunt Carol. 2 cousins. Everyone. I swallowed hard. So everyone knew? Dad sighed. Claire, don't make this into something it isn't. I'm just asking. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I will never forget. Things have been tense when you're around lately. We wanted one peaceful Christmas. I looked down at the pie in my hand. A peaceful Christmas. Apparently, peace meant removing me from the room. I didn't argue. I didn't remind him about everything I had done for the family. And I definitely didn't mention the house. I simply said, okay. Then I ended the call. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to fix the situation. I walked toward the checkout. But halfway there, I stopped. The bakery section was right beside me. The cookies were still in my cart. And suddenly, I knew exactly where I was going. There was a family shelter about 15 minutes away. I'd passed it dozens of times without ever thinking much about it. That morning, I turned my car toward it. I had no idea that the decision to give away one simple box of Christmas cookies would eventually change the future of the house my parents already believed belonged to them. The shelter was warmer than I expected. Not because of the heating. Because of the people inside. Paper snowflakes covered one wall. A small Christmas tree stood near the entrance, decorated with handmade ornaments. Volunteers moved between tables carrying food and donated clothes. I walked to the reception desk with the box of cookies. "Donations go over there," a woman said with a smile. I nodded and placed the box on the table. "I hope these are okay." "They're perfect." I was about to leave when I noticed a little girl standing beside the Christmas tree. She looked about 9 years old. Her dark hair was tied into a loose ponytail, and her red sweater was slightly too big. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the cookies. Not greedily. Carefully. As if she wasn't sure she was allowed to want them. I glanced at the volunteer. "Are those for everyone?" "Yes." The girl immediately looked away. I smiled at her. "You can have one." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Of course." She looked toward a woman sitting at a nearby table. The woman stood and walked over. She looked tired, but composed, wearing an old winter coat and holding a paper cup of coffee. "Emily," she said gently. "What do you say?" "Thank you." Then the woman looked at me. "I'm Rachel." "Claire." We shook hands. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe I didn't want to return to an empty apartment. Maybe I wasn't ready to think about my father's words. Rachel and I started talking. She told me she and Emily had been staying at the shelter for almost 2 months. Rachel had worked at a small accounting office until the company suddenly closed. She had expected to find another job quickly, but then her savings disappeared into rent, food, and bills. When the lease on their apartment ended, she couldn't afford the deposit for another place without a steady income. One problem had simply led to another. She wasn't asking me for anything. That was what struck me most. She spoke calmly, almost as if she were describing a difficult week at work. "I'm working on getting us out," she said. I looked at Emily. The girl was sitting at the table, carefully opening her cookie. Then she looked up. "Miss Claire?" "Yes." "Did you bring all of these?" I smiled. "Yes." She thought for a second. "Then you should have one too." I laughed. "I think I will." For the first time that day, I felt something loosen inside me. We talked for another 20 minutes. Emily told me she loved drawing and hated math. She wanted a dog someday, but Rachel said they needed a permanent home first. When I finally stood up to leave, Emily suddenly hugged me. It lasted only a second. But I froze. That morning, my own father had made me feel like my presence was a problem. And a child who knew absolutely nothing about me had just made me feel welcome. Outside, I sat in my car and stared through the windshield. Then I opened the photos of the bungalow. Mom standing beside the kitchen window. Dad imagining his chair in the living room. They had looked so happy. I had loved giving them that happiness. But now one question kept returning. What if a gift stops being a gift the moment someone believes they are entitled to it? My phone began ringing. Mom. I watched the screen until the call ended. Then Dad called. I turned the phone face down. I wasn't ready to decide what would happen to the house. But I knew one thing. I would not pretend Christmas morning had never happened. And I would not give away the biggest gift of my life simply because my parents had already decided it belonged to them. I drove home that afternoon without turning on the radio. Usually, silence made me uncomfortable. That day, I needed it. When I walked into my apartment, I placed the grocery bags on the kitchen counter and noticed the envelope containing the house documents. It was still inside my purse. I pulled it out and set it on the table. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. The house was still mine. That fact should have felt obvious. Instead, it felt strangely powerful. I opened my laptop and found the email from my attorney. The transfer had been prepared, but it hadn't been finalized. Nothing had been signed by my parents. No deed had been delivered. Legally, they had no ownership. Emotionally, though, they had already moved in. I remembered Mom measuring the living room windows. Dad talking about his chair. The way they had discussed where they would put the Christmas tree. At the time, their excitement had made me happy. Now it made my stomach hurt. My phone rang again. Mom. This time I answered. Claire, where are you? At home. Why didn't you come this morning? The question almost made me laugh. You know why? There was a pause. We didn't think you'd actually be upset. I closed my eyes. That sentence told me more than she realized. They had known I would be hurt. They had simply assumed my hurt wouldn't matter for very long. I didn't know there was a Christmas celebration, I said. You were busy lately. I wasn't busy. Mom sighed. Your father thought it would be better. There it was again. Dad. The person everyone could blame when a decision became uncomfortable. Did you agree with him? She didn't answer immediately. Claire, we just wanted one peaceful day. I looked at the envelope on the table. You know what I find strange? What? I was planning to give you the house today. Silence. Real silence this time. What? The transfer paperwork was ready. I was going to tell you this morning. Mom's voice changed instantly. Oh, sweetheart. I almost wished I hadn't said it. Because suddenly she wasn't talking about Christmas anymore. She was talking about the house. She asked whether the paperwork could still be completed. I listened. Then I asked quietly. If I hadn't told you about the house, would you still think leaving me out was okay? She didn't answer. That was my answer. I ended the call without arguing. Then I opened my attorney's contact. My finger hovered over the phone number. I knew I couldn't make a permanent decision while I was angry. So I didn't. Instead, I sent one simple message. Please pause all steps regarding the transfer of the property. I need to reconsider. Then I put my phone away. I thought about Rachel. About Emily. About that little girl asking whether she was really allowed to have a cookie. For years, I had believed the best way to love people was to give them things. Time. Money. Help. Solutions. Maybe I had confused being needed with being loved. That thought stayed with me all evening. Around 7, my sister Hannah called. Unlike Mom, she sounded uncomfortable. Claire, I wanted to explain. Okay. I thought you knew. Knew what? That we were celebrating on Christmas Eve. I sat down. You thought I knew? Yes. Who told you that? Mom. I stared at the wall. What exactly did she say? Hannah hesitated. She said you had other plans. Other plans. The same story. Except I hadn't made any plans. And suddenly, I understood something. This hadn't been an accidental change of schedule. Someone had decided I wouldn't be there. And then they had given everyone a reason not to question my absence. For the first time that day, I felt something stronger than sadness. I felt clarity. I thanked Hannah and ended the call. Then I looked again at the house documents. The decision wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Christmas anymore. It was about whether I was willing to give someone a gift after discovering that they believed they were entitled to it. And I already knew the answer. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice. We wanted one peaceful Christmas. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open in front of me. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about what came next. At 9 o'clock, my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost ignored it. But this time, I answered. Claire, we need to talk. I agree. There was a long pause. Your father is upset. I almost smiled. So am I. He thinks you're overreacting. I haven't done anything yet. Another silence. Then Mom said, we were hoping you'd still give us the house. I looked at the documents sitting beside my coffee. Why? Because you promised. No, Mom. I said I bought you a house. I never signed it over. But you knew how much it meant to us. I did. And now you're taking it away because of one Christmas? I leaned back in my chair. No. I'm reconsidering it because of what Christmas showed me. She didn't respond. I continued. I thought I was giving you a home. But somewhere along the way, you started believing I owed it to you. That isn't fair. Maybe it isn't. My voice remained calm. But neither was being the only person in the family who wasn't invited. Mom sighed. Your sister says she feels terrible. I believe her. She didn't know. I know. Then Mom asked the question I had been expecting. So what are you going to do with the house? I looked out the window. I don't know yet. She sounded nervous. You're not going to sell it, are you? I haven't decided. Claire. I need time. After we hung up, I sat quietly for several minutes. Then I remembered Rachel. I remembered the way she had said, I'm working on getting us out. I opened my laptop and searched for the shelter's website. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a way to help. Maybe a reason to stop feeling sorry for myself. I found a page about families preparing to leave temporary housing. There were lists of needs. Furniture. Kitchen supplies. Deposits. Stable housing. I stared at that last phrase. Stable housing. My eyes moved to the photographs of the house on my phone. 3 bedrooms. A quiet street. A backyard. A place where a child could finally have a room of her own. I immediately pushed the thought away. It was ridiculous. The house had been bought for my parents. I wasn't going to make a huge emotional decision because I had met a mother and daughter for 20 minutes. But then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Rachel. Thank you for yesterday. Emily hasn't stopped talking about the cookies. I smiled despite myself. Then another message appeared. She said you made Christmas feel normal. I stared at those words for a long time. Normal. That was all the little girl had wanted. Not luxury. Not a perfect family. Just one normal Christmas. I put the phone down. For years, I had believed that family meant giving people another chance no matter how many times they hurt you. That morning, I began wondering if family could also mean knowing when to stop. I picked up the house documents. Then I made a call. Not to my parents. To my attorney. I'd like to ask about another option for the property, I said. What kind of option? I looked again at the photo of the house. A temporary housing arrangement. There was a pause. Claire, are you sure? No. I took a breath. But I want to understand what would be possible. And for the first time since Christmas morning, I felt like I was making a decision for myself. Not for my parents. Not for my family. For me. My attorney called me back the following afternoon. There are several ways you could structure this, he explained. You could keep the property, rent it out, sell it, or arrange a temporary housing agreement through a nonprofit. I listened carefully. And if I wanted to let a family live there without transferring ownership? That can be done. We'd need the proper agreement and some protections for you. I looked at the house photos again. Would the family pay rent? Not necessarily. I was quiet. Then I asked, what would you recommend? He paused. I'd recommend you don't make the decision based on guilt. Decide what you actually want the property to mean. That sentence stayed with me. What did I want the house to mean? For years, I had thought it would mean gratitude. A thank you to my parents. Proof that everything I had sacrificed for my family had been worth it. But maybe a house didn't have to be proof of anything. Maybe it could simply be a house. A safe place. A beginning. I called the shelter. The volunteer who answered recognized my name. Claire? Yes. I have a question about Rachel and Emily. There was a short pause. They're still here. I was wondering if Rachel is available to talk. A few minutes later, Rachel came to the phone. Is everything okay? Yes. I just wanted to ask you something. I explained that I had a house available. I didn't tell her about my parents. I didn't tell her why I was considering it. I simply said that I was thinking about letting a family stay there temporarily while they got back on their feet. Rachel was silent. Then she said, Claire, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything yet. I couldn't afford market rent. I know. And I wouldn't want to take advantage of you. You wouldn't be. She breathed in slowly. Why us? That question stopped me. Because I didn't have a perfect answer. Because I met your daughter, I finally said. And because I realized I have something she needs. Rachel began to cry. Quietly. I don't know how we could ever repay you. You don't have to. We agreed to meet the following day. When I hung up, I expected to feel completely certain. Instead, I felt nervous. This was real now. It wasn't an idea anymore. It was a decision that could change another family's life. That evening, Hannah came to my apartment. She looked exhausted. I owe you an apology, she said. I invited her inside. She sat at the kitchen table. I should have called you that morning. Yes. I didn't know Mom had told everyone you were busy. I nodded. I believe you. Hannah looked down. Dad thinks you're going to take the house away. I haven't decided. She looked at me. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you still want to give it to them? I thought about it. Then I shook my head. Not like this. She nodded slowly. I understand. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Hannah whispered, maybe we all got too comfortable with you always being the one who fixed everything. I looked at her. That might be the most honest thing anyone has said to me this week. She smiled sadly. I think you were so busy taking care of everyone that nobody noticed who was taking care of you. That sentence hurt. Because it was true. And for the first time, I wasn't angry about it. I was ready to change it. The next afternoon, Rachel arrived at the house with Emily. I was waiting on the front porch when their car pulled into the driveway. Emily got out first. She looked at the house and froze. Is this it? I smiled. This is it. She looked at her mother. Rachel stepped out of the car slowly, almost as if she was afraid to believe what she was seeing. It's beautiful, she whispered. It needs some work, I said. But it's yours to make comfortable. Rachel shook her head. No, Claire. We can't just. You can stay here while you get back on your feet. She looked at me for several seconds. Then she started crying. I walked over and hugged her. You don't owe me anything. Emily had already run toward the backyard. Mom. There's a tree. Rachel laughed through her tears. There hasn't been a yard for her to play in for a long time. I watched Emily run around the grass. For the first time, the house looked different to me. It wasn't an empty property waiting for my parents. It was becoming a home. I handed Rachel a set of keys. She stared at them. Are you sure? Yes. She closed her fingers around them. Thank you. I nodded. Then my phone rang. Mom. I knew exactly why she was calling. I stepped away from the porch and answered. Hello? Claire, your father wants to talk to you. I can hear you. He came onto the line. You gave the house away? No. His voice became sharp. Your mother said there's another family living there. Temporarily. You promised that house to us. I changed my mind. You can't do that. I can. It's still legally mine. He went silent. Then he said, after everything we've done for you? I closed my eyes. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because it was true. Because it made me realize how conditional their love had become. I didn't buy that house because you owed me something, I said. I bought it because I wanted to make you happy. And now? Now I want to do something different with it. He laughed bitterly. So strangers matter more than your own family? I looked toward the backyard. Emily was chasing a butterfly. Rachel was standing by the kitchen door, watching her daughter smile. No, I said quietly. I'm finally learning that caring about my family doesn't mean giving them everything they ask for. My father didn't answer. Neither did I. I ended the call. Then I stood there for a moment, holding my phone. I expected guilt. Instead, I felt relief. That evening, I helped Rachel unpack a few donated boxes. Emily put a small drawing on the refrigerator. It was a picture of the house. 3 stick figures stood in front of it. Then she added a 4th. That's you, she explained. I smiled. Why am I so small? Because you're outside. I laughed. Why am I outside? She looked at me like the answer was obvious. Because this is our home now. I didn't know what to say. I just hugged her. And for the first time, I understood something I had spent years missing. A home isn't defined by who owns the deed. It's defined by who finally feels safe enough to call it home. For the next few weeks, I tried to keep my distance from my parents. Not because I hated them. Because I needed to hear my own thoughts without their voices drowning them out. Rachel found a part-time bookkeeping job and began looking for something permanent. Emily started attending a nearby school. The house slowly changed. There were drawings on the refrigerator, shoes by the door, and a small collection of books on the living room shelf. It looked lived in. It looked happy. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Hannah called. Mom wants everyone to come for dinner. I almost said no. Then she added, she wants to apologize. I hesitated. Does Dad know? Yes. And he agreed? He said he'll be there. I wasn't sure whether that was a good sign. Still, I agreed. That evening, I arrived at my parents' house at 7. Mom opened the door. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she hugged me. I stood there stiffly before finally putting my arms around her. I'm glad you came, she whispered. We sat around the dining table. Dad was quiet. Hannah looked nervous. Mom had prepared all my favorite dishes. For years, this would have made me happy. That night, it made me sad. Finally, Dad spoke. I owe you an apology. I looked at him. He stared down at his plate. What we did on Christmas was wrong. I didn't say anything. We should have invited you. Yes, I said quietly. He nodded. And we shouldn't have assumed the house was ours. That surprised me. I looked at Mom. She was crying. I think, she said, we got so excited about what you were giving us that we forgot you were giving it. That sentence broke something open inside me. Not in a painful way. In a freeing way. I didn't need you to be perfect, I said. I just needed you to see me. Dad looked up. We do see you. I don't think you did. Nobody spoke. I took a breath. For years, I thought being the reliable one meant I had to keep everyone happy. I thought if I gave enough, helped enough, fixed enough, then I'd always have a place at the table. Mom wiped her eyes. You always had a place. Then why was I the only one missing from Christmas? She couldn't answer. And this time, I didn't need her to. Dad finally said, we were selfish. I nodded. Yes. You were. It was the first time I had ever said that to him. And strangely, it didn't feel cruel. It felt honest. Then he asked, are you really letting that family stay in the house? Yes. How long? As long as they need to become stable. He looked down. Then he nodded. I hope it works out for them. It wasn't a dramatic apology. There were no tears from him. No big speech. Just a simple sentence. But it was enough for that night. After dinner, Mom walked me to the door. Claire? I turned. I don't want to lose you. I looked at her. You won't. But things have to change. She nodded. I know. And for the first time, I believed she meant it. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in months. The house was still mine. But somehow, it had given me something far more valuable than money could ever buy. It had taught me that love doesn't require you to disappear for everyone else. And sometimes, the most important thing you can give your family isn't another sacrifice. It's a boundary. 3 months passed. Life settled into a rhythm I hadn't expected. Rachel found a full-time bookkeeping position at a local company. It wasn't her dream job, but it was steady. She was saving money every month and slowly rebuilding her life. Emily loved her new school. She joined an art club and covered the refrigerator with drawings. And the house became warmer with every passing week. Not because of the heating. Because it finally felt lived in. One afternoon, Rachel knocked on my door. I got something for you. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph. It showed Emily standing in front of the house, holding a little Christmas ornament. On the back, Rachel had written, "Thank you for giving my daughter a place where she could feel safe again." I stared at the photograph for a long time. You didn't have to give me this. I wanted to. She smiled. We're not staying forever, you know. I know. I've been saving for an apartment. I know. She looked at me. But I hope you understand what this house gave us. I did. More than she knew. That evening, I called my parents. Mom answered. Claire? Hi, Mom. There was a brief silence. Then she asked, "Are you coming for Christmas?" I smiled. Yes. And you're bringing anything? I laughed. Cookies. She laughed too. It felt strange. But good. On Christmas morning, I arrived at my parents' house with a box of homemade cookies. Hannah was already there. Dad was standing by the fireplace. Mom hugged me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was trying to earn my place in the room. I simply belonged there. After dinner, Dad handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "We're proud of you," it said. I looked at him. "Really?" He nodded. "We should have said it more often." I smiled. "I think you should." He laughed. Then Mom reached for my hand. "We've learned something too." "What?" "That loving someone doesn't mean expecting them to keep proving it." I squeezed her hand. That was enough. Later that evening, I drove past the house. The lights were glowing through the windows. I could see a Christmas tree in the living room. Emily was sitting on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper. Rachel was laughing. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. For the first time, I understood that letting go of something I had planned for my parents hadn't made my family smaller. It had made my life bigger. I had spent years believing love meant giving until there was nothing left of me. Now I knew better. Love could be generous without being self-destructive. Kind without being weak. And sometimes, saying no to the people you love is the very thing that finally teaches everyone how to love you properly. The house was still mine. But it no longer felt like something I owned. It felt like something I had helped create. A second chance. For Rachel. For Emily. For my parents. And, perhaps most importantly, for myself. A year later, the house looked different. Not bigger. Not newer. Just happier. Rachel had finally moved into her own apartment 3 months earlier. She had saved enough money, found a small place near Emily's school, and, for the first time in years, had a home that belonged entirely to them. But she still visited the house. Especially at Christmas. That December, I stood outside in the cold, watching Rachel and Emily decorate the front porch. Emily was hanging lights around the railing. She had grown so much since the day they first arrived. She looked at me and smiled. "Claire. Come look." She held up a handmade wreath. "I made it myself." I smiled. "It's beautiful." Rachel walked over carrying a box of decorations. "You know she refused to let me help." "Because you always put everything in the wrong place," Emily said seriously. Rachel laughed. "I guess I've been doing it wrong all these years." I watched them teasing each other and felt something warm settle inside me. A year ago, I had been standing in this same house wondering whether I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought giving the house to Rachel and Emily meant giving away something that belonged to my family. Instead, I had discovered something completely different. A home isn't defined by who owns the keys. It's defined by who feels safe behind the door. That evening, we decorated the Christmas tree together. Emily placed the star on top. Rachel turned on the lights. And I stood back, watching the room glow. For a moment, I remembered the first night Rachel had walked through that door. She had been scared. Emily had been silent. And I had been angry at my own family. None of us knew what would happen next. But somehow, that difficult moment had changed all of our lives. Later, Rachel handed me a small gift. "This is for you." I opened it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph of the house. But it wasn't an ordinary photograph. It had been taken on the first Christmas they spent there. Emily was standing on the porch. Rachel was beside her. And I was in the background, laughing. Underneath the photograph were 5 simple words. "Home is where love stays." I felt my eyes fill with tears. "You took this?" Emily nodded proudly. "I wanted you to have it." I hugged her. "Thank you." That night, after they left, I sat alone by the Christmas tree. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't empty. Not anymore. I looked around at the room and realized something. For years, I had believed that family was something you were born into. Now I understood that family could also be something you chose. Sometimes people hurt each other because they don't know how to love properly. Sometimes they need to lose something before they understand its value. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't a house, money, or forgiveness. It's a chance to become better. I looked toward the window. Snow had started falling. I smiled. The house had never been the ending I imagined. It had become the beginning of something none of us expected. And maybe that's what Christmas really meant. Not getting everything you wished for, but discovering that what you needed had been waiting for you all along. I turned off the lights and walked upstairs. Behind me, the Christmas tree continued to glow softly in the darkness. And for the first time, I knew without a doubt. I was exactly where I was supposed to be.